Hey y'all, it's Lavon and welcome to my YouTube channel. So I just wanted to share an encouraging thought in today's video, talking about trusting God. Sometimes our lives can take us on can take some crazy turns, and it can leave us frustrated and confused and trying to understand what's going on. And sometimes we may even have questions, asking God why we're in certain positions, why we've gone down certain paths, why He has allowed certain things to happen. We're human, and it's natural to have questions sometimes. No matter how spiritual we are or how close to God we are, sometimes we have questions. Sometimes life can go in a direction that just causes us to have questions. The month of April is an anniversary month for me, and we just went into the month of May, but 5 years ago in April, I went through one of the worst trials imaginable. When it happened, it was overwhelming, it was unbelievable. It just seemed so unfair, like too much to bear. And I was sharing with my pastor what was going on, even he was like, this sounds like something out of the movies, Lavon. This is crazy. I'd given my life to God at a young age, and I really did try to do everything right. I wasn't perfect, but I really tried from a child to do everything right. I got saved at the age of 10, and I tried so hard to please God, even in my youth. I wanted God to guide my life, to bless my life. I'd never tasted alcohol, never experimented with drugs, never smoked, kept myself pure until marriage. In fact, my first time ever kissing a man was at the altar on my wedding day. I was just a good girl. I was a good girl, like the poster child for a good girl. I was really obedient to my mom, had a beautiful relationship with my mother. We were very close, and I was a pleaser. Like, I wanted to do everything to make her proud, and I did. I was obedient to my pastor, to his advice, and did all I could to be obedient there, because I knew that he was a man of God, and I wanted, again, God to bless my life. I was a teacher's pet in school, just a good girl. And I was self-motivated about my choices. Nobody was making me be this way. I loved God, and this is how I wanted to live. I decided at a very young age that I want to be a certain type of woman. I want to live a certain type of way. I want to please God. And I set out on that journey at a very young age. I had a made-up mind. I was a leader. I was never a follower. And that's just how I chose to live my life. I always knew that there was benefits in salvation. There's benefits to serving God, and I wanted all of those benefits. I didn't want to do anything to affect my life in a negative way. And I knew that obedience, first of all to God, and then to my mom and my pastor's advice, would put me on that path. So eventually, everything went wrong. Things went very, very wrong. Everything I had worked so hard for, sacrificed for, made good choices, everything, my world came crashing down. I guess I kind of felt like, if I do everything a certain way, I would have a blessed life. This will guarantee, this will ensure. But there are no guarantees in life. There are no guarantees in life, and that wasn't my story. So when things took a turn negatively, I loved God with my whole heart, but I had questions. I was frustrated, I was upset, and I had questions. Why was this happening? Sometimes when we're at our lowest ebb, when we have no strength to stand on our own, when life is too much for us, it's in those times that we really come to know who God is. It's in those times that all we have is God. We have no strength to stand on our own. We can only depend on God's strength. That is when we really get to know who He is. Because see, even though I'd given my life to God at a young age, and I lived a good moral life, when I came to this situation, I realized that I need something greater than what I had all these years. See, I was a good girl. And it's a very tricky thing with church girls, especially growing up in the culture of my church, because we are definitely a high moral church. We're taught high morals, and which is a beautiful thing, and I love that we're taught that. But my friends and I often talk, and it's like we sometimes laugh, like, you know, we feel like we got a real experience with God at an older age. We gave our life to God at a young age, but you can sometimes confuse good morals with a real relationship with God. And when I found myself facing these situations, I had a relationship with God, but I needed something deeper and something greater. During this time, I was really going through the fire. I was really, really going through the fire. And I got up early one morning. You know, I was so pressed, and I was fasting, and I came downstairs to the living room while my boys were still sleeping, and I fell on my knees before God, and I just began to just cry out to God and just pour my heart out. And I remember I was crying so hard that morning that I literally felt like I was going to cry my insides out. Like I felt like I was going to cry my guts out. I was literally like, it was so much pressure and so much stress that I can't even put it into words how I felt in that moment. There was so much coming at me. It was enough to make a person seriously lose their mind. Thank God I have a strong mind, and that wasn't an issue, but it could have definitely taken a weak person over the edge. And I remember being on my knees that morning, and I was just crying. I was crying and crying and crying. Just at times I couldn't even talk, but you know, tears are a language that God understands. And I was just talking to God between the tears and just asking him why I was here. And during that time that I was going through the difficult situation, my pastor, Pastor Lee Hampton, he preached a message, and I can't remember the exact title of his message, but in that message, he said, sometimes we have to remind God of his promises. Sometimes it's good to just remind God of his promises. Not that God forgets, because he doesn't forget anything, but sometimes it's just good to remind God of his promises. And as I was on my knees that morning, just crying and just pouring my heart out to God, I began to remind God of his promises. I began to remind God of how I'd lived. You know, God, you said this. You know, I remembered you in my youth. I gave my life to you. I was obedient. I honored my mother and my father. I respected my pastor. I respected counsel. I just went down the line. I was like, God, I kept myself pure. I did it your way. When a lot of my friends were going astray and other people were messing up and choosing other ways, I was like, I am going to do this God's way. And I began to remind God of how I'd done it, how I'd lived before him, the path I'd walked. I was like, God, I did this and you said this. And I did this and you said this. And I did everything you told me to do. So why am I here? I began to just say, why? Why, God? Like, why am I here? Like how did this happen? Like all of that, why am I here? And a funny thing happened while I was reminding God of his promises to me, while I was reiterating to God how I'd lived. And I know that God reigns on the just as well as the unjust. We're not exempt from trials. We're not exempt. Sometimes it's the trials, well, all the time, it's our trials that help us make heaven. But I felt like this is a lot. And I was like, God, you know, I went down that list. And as I was sharing with God and saying to God how I lived and what he promised me, and God, you promised me, as I was saying it, a funny thing happened. My faith began to catch hold. As I was saying those words, reminding God of how I'd lived, how I'd lined up with his word, my life lined up with his word, and, you know, how I did everything, I began to feel a peace come over me. It was interesting. But it was like I began to calm down. My tears began to dry up. I began to feel encouraged. I felt strength. I felt like, yeah, God promised me. I was obedient. I did it God's way. And I began to feel reassurance, like it's going to be okay. And you know, when you're going through hard times, you're kind of by yourself. My mom was gone, and sometimes situations are so crazy that people can't relate to them. Like, I really just kind of went in my own bubble. I had to go in my own bubble. Like, people were talking, and that's okay because that's normal. But it's like, you really, in those moments sometimes, I have my close friends, and I thank God for them, and my sisters, and close friends of mine that I could talk to that were encouraging me and checking on me. But for the most part, when you're in the fire to a certain extent, you sometimes are on an island by yourself. And that makes it even harder. It makes it even harder. My mom had gone through a lot, and I know that if she was here, I could have talked to her, but she was gone. You know what I'm saying? And it was hard. It was really hard. I mean, because it was so deep. You know what I mean? And so my pastor had just passed away. My late pastor had just passed away, and he was older and had a lot of wisdom. And I just was like, he was actually very sick at the time, and I didn't want to bother him. He was kind of in his last days of life, and I felt like, I don't want to bother him. He has so much on him already. During this time, my pastor was in his latter days, and he was very low sick. My late pastor that passed away, his son is our pastor now, and I really didn't want to bother him. I had talked to him some to a certain extent, and even in his sick state and his weak state, he would talk to me and encourage me. And whenever he would see me at church, one time he sent someone to look for me. He was weak, and he was on the front rows after service, and he sent someone to look for me and had them bring me up there to him. And he sent someone to get me, and he's asked somebody, is LaVon here today? Because he was just checking on me, because he knew I was just going through some crazy stuff. And they came and was like, Pastor Hampton is looking for you. And so I said, okay. So I went up to the front. He just kind of grabbed my hand, and just was always giving me a little encouraging word. And I had gone to visit him one day with my siblings to sing to him. And this was in his latter days as well. And he kind of pulled me in the corner and just holding on to my hand and just saying, God's got you. And I'm praying for you. Like, I'm calling your name out every day. Like, God has you. And that was so encouraging to me. And he passed away shortly after that, very shortly after that he passed away. His son is a pastor now, and his messages, it's like a continuation of encouragement. His son's messages, my pastor's son took over pastorship, and his messages have been like just everything I needed. Like, during that time, it was just every service, every message was just on point. Like, God literally gave him what I needed. So anyways, back to the prayer. I was on my knees praying, and I was just crying my guts out, and just like, God, I said, you're God. I said, you're God. And I need you to free me from this situation. I need you to work a miracle. I was like, I know this is a lot to ask, God, but I deserve it. Like, God, I need you to take care of this, to take care of me. I didn't want anything bad happening to anybody. I was like, God, I don't want you to hurt anybody in the process. I don't want anybody to be hurt. I don't want anything to happen bad to anybody, but I need you to fix this for me. I want to be free from the situation. I want it to be done with it, but I need you to fix this, God. I really need you to fix this. I was like, you're God, and you can do anything. And I just began to feel courage and encouragement. And it was just my private moment with God. It was just, I began to feel so much relief. The burden lifted that burdened me. Just when I came to God on my knees that day, I was crying my guts out. There's a song that says, lean on me when you have no strength to stand. When you feel you're going under, hold tighter to my hand. And another part of it says, when you come to the place that I'm all you have, then you find I'm all you need. And sometimes God waits for us to be moved before he moves. And in that moment, I felt so encouraged, and I felt like, I remember just breathing a sigh of relief. It was like, that's all God wanted. He needed me to just break down all the way and be like, God, I need you. I'm a fix-it person. I'm a strong person. I'm independent. I fix stuff. If something goes wrong, I figure it out. I couldn't figure this one out. This was way too big. I couldn't fix it. And that part was hard too, because it was like, I'm helpless. I'm helpless without God. And God showed me in that moment how he operates too. While I was on my knees reminding God of his promises, I was reminding myself of who God is. In the moment of me saying, God, you said this and I did this, and God, and it's like I begin to hear myself like, wait a minute. I begin to remember and come to the realization of who God was. And I was like, God's got this. You know, sometimes we have to express it and manifest it and just say it. And it's like, it was amazing. The favor I asked of God that day was impossible to man. It was impossible. It was crazy. I didn't even know, I didn't have a solution, but I was just like, God, I need you to take care of this. When I got off my knees that day, I was different. That morning, in the quietness by myself, me and God and the devil, there was a moment that took place there. When I got off my knees, I was not the same. There was such a peace that came over me that I was okay. I just knew it was going to be okay. I believe it was about 3 days later, or sometime within the week of me having that prayer and putting my request before God, that I received a phone call that would change my life forever. God had answered my prayer. It was so surreal that it was almost scary. It was so unbelievable. It was like an out-of-body experience. I felt like my body was leaving my body. It was so indescribable what God did for me that day. And it was so quick. Like I said, it was within a week. It might have been like 3 days, but I don't want to misspeak. It was within that week for sure. And I remember just laying in my bed, looking up like, wow. The answer to prayer was so clear and so precise. It was like, it was just clear. God was like, here you go. Everything you said is right. And I got you. Here you go. I will tell you, God is not a man that he should lie. God is real. He's real. What I've learned in this situation and other situations as well that I've gone through in this difficult season in my life is that God wants us to understand our nothingness. We're nothing. Without God, we're nothing. I don't care how good you live, we're still no better than filthy rags. And God wants us to remember that. And I've learned, I have had so many moments in the past few years where I've had to I've cried like I've never cried before. The pain has been deeper than it ever was before. And in my worst moments, my lowest moments, I'm telling you, every single time God swoops in and he answers so beautifully. He takes care of it. But I've learned with myself that it's like God wants to bring me to a certain point before he'll move. I have to be moved in a way to really get his attention, because he wants to really have my attention in those moments. And I've learned that about me and God's connection. I can't speak for anybody else, but as for me and God, that's his thing with me. Do I have your attention? You need me, I'm here. I want you to know that you need me. I want you to know that you can't do this without me. And I know that now. I'm learning to keep my communication and my relationship tighter with God. I'm not one to get up in church and give big testimonies, and that's easy to do. That's easy to do. I told someone one time, I said, it's easy to be on fire for God when your marriage is perfect, your finances are perfect, your kids are all healthy, life is good. It's easy. It's easy to testify big, and it's easy to, but when you're going through real situations back to back to back, and you've had so many things thrown at you, watch that person. I don't, like I said, I don't say a whole lot, but I'm so grateful for my relationship with God. I'm so grateful for the bond that God and I have. I'm so grateful that when no one else is there, or when no one else understands, he's there. He's an ever-present help in the time of trouble. He has never failed me. Never. I have been through some tough stuff. I mean, I could write a book. But not one time have I come to God and he's failed me. He's never failed. He can't fail. He can't fail. So I wanted to just encourage somebody else today that if God promised it, if he said it, he's going to do it. He's going to fulfill it. We just have to trust him. The enemy is good at bringing anxiety and doubt and confusion. And his whole goal is to separate us from God. He wants us to doubt God. He wants us to be angry with God. But the devil's a liar. He's a liar and the father of lies. God said, ask and you shall receive. When God says something, he means it. We have to work on our faith sometimes, and I've been going through a faith building journey myself. Your faith can be shaken. You can go through so much sometimes, and our first reaction is to try to fix it ourselves, try to find our own solutions. And I'm learning to pray first. Go to God first. Don't make him the alternative. Make him the first thing, And the enemy has no might against God. God has all power. The enemy is nothing in a competition with God. And if we can keep that in mind, we'll be okay. The devil bluffs. He bluffs, and it can affect us. I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't been affected by it. He can bring so many things, and there's so much going on, and he can you're already going through it, and the enemy's just piling more on you. But we have to remember that he is powerless compared to God. He has power if we give it to him. But if we stay with God, we cannot lose. We cannot lose. God's got us. The most important thing is to make sure that we are staying aligned with God's word, having confidence to go before God. That's one thing I've learned too. There's been times where I was not praying like I should. I, caught up in life, and maybe even caught up in stress, but you don't pray like you should, and it's easy to get a distance there. And that's when the enemy can really come in and work. So it's important to stay close to God. Start each day with God. Get before God. That, I'm telling you, it makes such a big difference. Start every day before God. Read his word. Get to know who he is. I've been lately just kind of reading a lot of Bible stories in the Bible. I love encouraging scriptures and all that, but it's like I've been kind of just focusing on Bible stories because it reminds me of the awesomeness of God. when you read about Moses and Paul and David and Esther, I could go on, and Ruth. That's when I just read again recently the story of Ruth, and God is just, He's amazing. He's amazing, and I thank God for having a mind to serve Him. Never have I had a mind to go out into sin and to, drink and commit adultery or fornication or, that's not who I am. But we can be guilty of being negligent, sitting right in church, having perfect morals, and not giving God what He deserves. And that's something that I was guilty of, and it weakens you, and you just, so I thank God for the mind that I have. I thank Him for what He's brought me through. So if you're going through something today and it seems so black, whether it's health issues, marital issues, financial issues, whatever it is, just remember to trust God. I'm a living witness. There is nothing too big for God to handle. There is nothing too great for God to take care of. Nothing. So be encouraged. Trust God. It works. It works. So that's all for today. I hope that my story encouraged someone out there that may be going through a hard time. Just trust Him. Trust Him and be true. Stick with God.